Hello and welcome back to the channel. I am Jeremy of Brendle Concepts, and today is, well, actually it's a pretty exciting day for me. Had a lot of work over the last couple weeks. The bulk of the work on Project Rising Sun is done at this point. As you can see, the foam that I've been laying has got a nice little shiny surface to it. It's been soaked in resin. This is part of the process that I'm going to be talking about in a lot of detail today because I've had a lot of great questions, a lot of interactions with people that are kind of scratching their heads and saying, what the hell are you doing? So I'm going to dive deep into this process. This is what is referred to as moldless composite construction. It's not something that people use very often, but for me, this is the best way to do it. And I'm kind of going to elaborate on that. What I do here is build one-offs. I don't reproduce parts. I don't, go out into the aftermarket scene and see what everybody else is doing and try and copy. This is what I want to build. This is how I want to build it. When I do a build like this, now, case in point, Project Rising Sun here, this is a promotional build for us. This vehicle will be used for car shows, events to show what I do. This vehicle will then, once it's served its purpose, we will sell it and I'll build another one. So with that, I do not build in the traditional sense of mass production. Typically, what everyone is seeing in the industry right now is a lot of body kits that are bolt-on. And again, nothing against bolt-on body kits. They are done so that, anyone that has a Toyota Supra or whatever car, they can get this body kit and get the look that they want. For me, again, this is about being unique. This is about building, my vision or my client's vision, whatever the case may be. Typically, this is stuff that you can't find on the internet. It doesn't exist. It is, a lot of times it's like, I like a little bit of this, I like a little bit of this, and I want to make it into this. And that's kind of where I end up. Now, with traditional body kits that you would get from any of the big name brands, they are doing a mold layup most times. And that's fine. If you want to do mass production, it is the best way to do it. The problem for me is it's a very, very extensive process to make a mold or a buck to simply produce this stuff in straight fiberglass. That's what brings us to this moldless composite construction. Now, you've seen on the internet people using spray foam, cardboard, and all kinds of different apparatus to create shapes. And hey, if that's how you do it, cool. I'm not knocking anyone. I will never knock anyone, especially someone that's trying to do something on their own for the first time. I mean, we've all been there. I've been fabricating now for closer to 30 years than 20, which sucks to say because it shows my age, but I've done a lot. And over the years, I've discovered different ways to do things that work for me. I've spent a lot of time, running different manufacturing facilities, teaching a lot of people in different, applications in fabrication. And it's one of the things that I love to do. And that's really one of the reasons why I wanted to make this channel, which is to show what I do, but also explain how I do it. So if you want to try it, you can do it. So we'll get into this moldless composite construction. I have a little sample piece that I want to show you that is kind of a mock-up to test this stuff. And I'm going to explain that now, and so you can kind of get the ins and outs of what this thing will look like when it's done. So let me grab that. I'll be right back. Okay, so this is a little piece here that I mocked up to simulate what I was going to be running into in this build. You can see in the backside here, I've kind of mimicked this port shape. I've also kind of mimicked the spines here that you'll see in this framework. And you can see here I have this foam that's already been inlaid. And on the front side, I have my fiberglass skin. So we're going to start with the inside and work our way out so you can kind of understand what a moldless composite construction would look like. Again, when you're talking about fiberglass and laying up in a mold, you have a form or a shape that you're going to put your fiberglass into, add your resin, and when it cures, you can pop the part out. There's your part. When we're talking about doing composites here without a mold or a buck or really a form to start with, we have to start with a framework. So my round rod right here is what I've been using for the framework on Project Rising Sun. I've had questions as to the thickness of the round rod that I'm using. I'm using a 3/16 round rod, and that is because simply I'm trying to match the contours on the body lines of the car. If you look at the door or any of the other parts, you can see how they've shaped the actual body lines, and it actually measures out to about 3/16 of an inch. So for me, I'm a big stickler on uniformity. So to mimic those, contours and the thickness of the contour into my parts will give that a very much OEM feel that I want. So the first step was to create, again, this metal structure here. That is the framework that we use to, put the foam into. So right here, you can see this little shape here, which mimics these panels that I've put in right here. Now, when I'm trying new products out for the first time, I always do test pieces. The reason being because fiberglass resin and foam, it's been done forever and it works fantastic. The only problem is you have to make sure that the foam is compatible with the resin that you're using. Now, on this section right here, you can see I have this glossy section. This has been, I've done basically 2 coats, light coats of fiberglass resin. That is to penetrate about halfway through this foam. In this upper right-hand section, you can see I actually, in my test piece, pulled that section out so I can make sure that I was getting, the thickness or the penetration with the resin that I wanted. The reason I didn't want to soak it through all the way is because on the actual body, I had to reinforce the foam with tape to make sure that it didn't sag due to gravity. I mean, this is a big span we're going here, and this foam is pretty stout, but you still have gravity and you get a little bit of a sag to it. I've had people ask me, well, why didn't you just add more round rod? Well, the simple answer to that is making these individual pieces of round rod is very time consuming. And the more points that you put on the car is, the more you have to make, the more you have to duplicate side to side. It's a lot of work. So the less you can do, the easier it is and the faster. And for me, this is about getting it done the best and quickest way that I possibly can. So now that we've got all this soaked out, the last step will be to add our fiberglass over the foam. Now, I've had people make comments and say that this will have no structural strength. We'll have, someone called it a paper car. A couple other weird comments that I kind of left my head, kind of scratching my head and going, okay, that's not the case, but this is why I'm doing this, to explain the process. Now, on a typical body kit that you would buy from, again, any big name brand, it's not really thick fiberglass, or it's, reinforced or, urethane plastic, however they're producing it, but it's not very thick. When you see these kits bolted on a car, you'll see, OEM panels that look thicker because either they bend the end to give it a material thickness and look, or they actually make it a thicker material. For me, when I see a fiberglass panel that's really, really thin, just bolted onto the body, to me, it doesn't have that uniformity that I'm looking for. And also, we've seen it time and time again where the slightest little bump, whatever, will crack some of these kits out. To me, that's just not the way to do it. If you're going to spend a lot of money on something, you want it to last. So this stuff right here is stout, and I mean really stout. This right here is only fiberglassed on one side and soaked halfway through. The entire panel is going to be soaked out from the backside and then fiberglass from the backside. All this metal structure, all this foam, everything that you see here on this car right now is going to be completely encased in fiberglass. All of that fiberglass is going to tie back into these base panels that I originally built, so that everything from the original car outward is completely 100% encased in fiberglass. A lot of this stuff you won't be able to get to, once these parts are in. So if you wouldn't lay up these base panels, it'd be very, very, very difficult to try and get the backside fiberglass and contoured correctly to match the panel. So again, when we're talking about a moldless composite construction like this, you have to start kind of from the inside and work your way out. And this is exactly what I'm doing. So I'm going to throw this piece down and we'll talk about a little bit more what I got going on. So here is the actual foam that I'm using. A lot of really good questions about the foam that I'm using on this project. And again, the foam that you're using, as long as it's compatible with the fiberglass resin or epoxy, whatever you're using to seal it, as long as it's compatible, it will work. For me, to try and do something like this in like a spray foam, to come back in and try and sand it all down, you could do it. It's a lot of extra work. To me, it's kind of unnecessary. And again, with spray foams and other things like that, you end up with air pockets and voids that you end up having to go back in and try and fix. So for me, if you can use a foam like this, that's already your material thickness that you want to end up with, this is very pliable. It works really well within my metal work here. This is why I'm using this material. The other thing that I really like about this particular foam is that it has this fabric. I'll pull it off here so you can see it. It has this fabric-like material on the front and the back side. Why I'm using this is because in the process of applying my fiberglass resin, it's kind of hard to put it on foam and see exactly what you're doing because foam absorbs it really quick. So as soon as you put the resin on, it wants to just soak it right in. Having this little bit of extra cloth here, like on the front side, it allows me to visually see how my resin is laying into the foam. So as I'm applying my resin, I can see where it's actually, where it's a light spot, where it's a dark spot. That's where it's been penetrating good, or I need to add more resin. So when we're talking about adding resin to foam like this, you can saturate it, but also you got to remember, like a sponge, it will just keep absorbing and absorbing and absorbing. So when we're talking about trying to make lightweight composite materials, we want to add just enough resin to solidify this, but not overdo it because we don't want to add extra weight that's unnecessary. Again, all this is going to be encased in fiberglass, and that's where the real strength comes in, not in this foam. So really all this is a backer or a structure that I can lay my fiberglass mat onto, then this will adhere to it and be completely part of the finished product when I'm done. None of this is going to come out. I don't have, bucks or molds that I have to contend with in the end. The inside of this looks just like the outside. And in the upcoming weeks, I'm going to be taking these panels off because I have to make my cuts, for body panels and whatnot. You will see the inside and how it actually looks. So this is just a little bit of an insight into the process of how I'm doing it and why I'm doing it. And if you guys have more questions about, the ins and outs, let me know. I've been, getting a lot of really, really good questions from people because they want to try it themselves. And if you are unsure, send me a message. Send me a private message. If you don't, to me, information is free. I love to teach. I love to help people out. So seriously, if you want a how-to video, let me know. If I get people that, really want to see more in-depth of how-to, I will do specific videos on how I do it. That is a lot more step-by-step so that you can actually maybe watch that, save that video, play-by-play, and try it yourself. So just putting that out there. But yeah, that's pretty much the process of where I'm at right now. So I've got some videos that I want to show you guys this week also of making, the metal skeleton here, making templates. One thing I want to say about templates, I've had a lot of questions about templates and why I do things the way I do on templates. And when we're talking about making a template, for one thing, it's easy. But when you're talking about going from side to side of a car, it gets a little bit more difficult because, you have to mirror things. And when you have a contour that runs one way, on the opposite side of the car, it obviously runs the opposite way. So it's a little bit of a mind trick to kind of get, how to do it right. And I don't mean right as in the right way, the wrong way. I just mean in my way. Uh, but yeah, so I'm going to show the template process because if you can get a template on one side of the car to basically flip it and mirror it on the other side of the car and it lines right up, well, then you know that from side to side, your parts are, proportionally, geometrically symmetrical, as close as they can be. So we're going to go into a little bit, like I said, more video of that. I'm going to try and talk over the video so I can kind of explain some things as I'm actually working. I think maybe I'm trying different formats with this with YouTube here just to see what everybody likes the most and how I can help everyone understand this process a little bit more. So yeah, that's pretty much it for today. We're gonna go into some more video now, and I'll explain as much as I can. But keep checking back because the next couple weeks are going to get really interesting. I've got a lot of stuff to come off. I got a lot of stuff, to build. I've been talking about doing internal structure here. Again, all these parts are going to get molded in. So in the end, the idea is to make all this stuff blend into all these areas as seamless as possible. There's going to be more round rod that has to be added down in these sections because I need to create floors and in a roof for these ports. I'm also going to be doing internal structure on the inside here for stability and strength. But we'll get into all that as I keep going. So, once again, thanks again for watching, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.
So again, in regards to making my templates, I want to explain this a little bit in a little bit more detail. First and foremost, I like to use painter's tape. It's a very cheap method for making a template. It works really well because you can apply it, it'll stay, in place, but it's also really easy to remove. Now, in this video, you can see what I'm doing is actually making sure that the tape is really stuck to the spines of the round rod. Now, to get my lines the way I want them, I want to make sure that the tape is really tight, really smooth, and it'll show exactly where I want to highlight. You'll see me adding a series of dots along the spines, and that is essentially just an outline for me. Around the wheel arch right there, I will actually run my thumbnail and create a little bit of a groove that I can just run my marker through that groove to create, a really nice arch that's very, very accurate to the round rod. Same thing in regards to the body line. You can see me actually smoothing out on the line that I want to trace with my fingernail. And again, more dot points to highlight the areas that I want to actually, make my lines to. Here I am just coming down off the top of the arch and, connecting all those little dots. It's really the easiest way that I know how to do it. The problem mostly with this is you can't apply a lot of pressure because the spines are only epoxied in at this point. I'll add a little extra tape just to make sure that when I'm pulling my template that it doesn't separate. Obviously it's just tape overlapped. So again, just a series of dots, and I label each template as I go so I can transfer it side to side. When I'm actually removing my template, I like to pull away from the foam so that, as I pull away, as I pull away from the foam, I'm not pulling the foam off of the round rod. Okay, again, I'm showing another template here, and the first thing I want to do is make sure that my pinstriping tape is secure to the body. I wanted to show this angle because in this view you can see the spines really start to appear in the tape as I lay it down. Here you can see I'm using basically 50% overlap from my tape from piece to piece. Again, making sure that it's really nice and tight, really pulling that thing tight and almost wrapping it around the round rod as much as I can to really get things as accurate as possible. As you go up the spines here, I like to continue to just apply pressure to make sure it stays where it's supposed to be. And also, as the rods, contour more, the tape has a tendency to want to separate. You'll see a little bit here, I actually start to add tape to the backside to make sure that the layers of tape do not separate as I keep working here. One of the reasons that I really like using the pinstriping tape to set my arch at the top is because I can run my thumbnail right underneath the pinstriping tape and it'll show the arch or the arc that I want to use or trace with my marker. You can see right here, I've already made that groove and I'm slowly going to work across it, and this will give me a really, really clean line to cut when I transfer this over to the foam. One of the things I always tell people is when you're making templates like this, pay attention to little details. Uh, Making sure that you get it right the first time will save you a lot of, hassles on the back end. Here again, I'm using that dots just to highlight the spines. I don't want to put a ton of pressure on them. I'll do that on both sides. That is my line that I'm going to come down. And I'm running my thumbnail against the arch there, and you can see it's going to make a little groove that I can just, again, run my marker right in that groove. As I pull away, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not pulling, that pinstriping tape off the body. I want to make sure that those lines stay nice and secure. So this is how I finish out my template. Now, you can see I had the, upper arch and the bottom arch already done. All I'm going to do here is smooth out my tape on my table, and I'm just going to simply connect the dots in a straight line. It may not look straight only because, the spines have a curvature to them. So if you follow the dots that you actually put down in the first place, I guarantee you, you will be right on point. So this is my template transfer onto the foam. It's a very simple process. All I'm really going to do is smooth out my template and make sure it's as flat as possible. I'm going to use a fine tip marker here to make sure I have a very thin line because I want my cuts to be very accurate. I've had people ask why I do not, just cut on the edge of the template, and that is simply because I don't want to risk damaging the template. I want to be able to use it from side to side of the car. You can see in the background where I already have one template that I've done. It's just kind of sitting there waiting to go. This is not, again, a very difficult process, but you want to take your time and make sure that you get these lines really, really accurate. It's going to save you so much headaches, by doing it this way. So this is how I trim these foam panels to fit. Now, when I actually do my taping, I'm marking the center of the spine to the center of the spine, but the foam has to go inside the spines, not from center to center. So what I'm going to do is use the bottom spine as my base starting point. I'm going to tape it into place to hold it in place so I can make my marks as to where I want to trim the excess. You can see I pull the foam away and I'm actually marking on the fiberglass where the round rod stops on the inside. From there, I can transfer those marks over to my foam and I'll be able to retrace, with my finger and drag along that line on the new marks, and that'll give me my cut line from the inside to the inside of the spine. Now I trimmed off the excess and you can see that this will fit right into the spines like I wanted to. I'm only going to take a little bit out of the corners because I've had welds in there. I need to make clearance so that it'll actually sit nice and the round rod in every direction. Once I have it to where I really like it, I'm just going to, again, tape it into place, and I'm going to make sure that, again, I'm resting the foam on that bottom round rod to make sure that everything is staying tight. There's not a lot of forgiveness in the foam, so you can't stretch it, and if you add too much foam, it's going to bulge. So you have to make these, these foam panels very, very accurate. Again, I'm marking my body lines as to, where I want to trim my foam. Again, I'll pull the foam off, and you can see I will drag my finger on the outside edge of the foam and line it up and just freehand this new line. But it's actually, going within the original contour of the template that we made. Every single one of these panels has had this process done, and some of these panels have taken a very long time to get them exactly where I want them. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing here is mitering the backside of my foam. First thing I'm going to do is establish where I want to miter back. And again, simply using my finger, I'm tracing along the contour of the foam, and which is representative of the template. And this is going to give me a guide as to how far the bevel should come back. The outer edge should be taken down basically to a knife's edge. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to be able to overlay as much fiberglass over that section. It's a high stress point, so I want to be able to build it up and make sure that I have a really good bond over those areas. This is a very tedious process. I highly recommend that you practice on several pieces of foam before you attempt this. If you get to this point and you make a mistake, it's very unfortunate because you're going to have to start all over again, which means cutting a new piece of foam, retrimming it to fit, etc. It's quite a pain in the butt. Some of the bigger panels have taken me, 30 minutes or more. This one in particular, I believe, is around 10 minutes. Uh, what I'm actually going to be doing here is pushing up from the bottom of the foam and squeezing the foam in between the blades. As that happens, I'm simply, snipping off the excess. It's a lot of trial and error. You kind of really got to pay attention to it. And again, really, really take your time. One little slip with the scissors here, you cut too deep, or you cut not enough, and it will ruin the entire piece. For me, since I'm right-handed, it is really a lot easier to start from the left side and work my way to the right because I can, kind of guide the foam from with my left hand into the scissors as I'm squeezing the scissors. If you are left-handed, you could try and do it the other way. For me, this is just the easiest way to do it. Some people could say, well, why wouldn't you just, sand down the foam after you resin it? You can, but the problem with that is I've, established these contours with my round rod, and if the foam is sticking up higher than the round rod, you're going to have to sand it down to a level, but that doesn't allow you to build up that little joint with with more fiberglass. So by beveling the backside of the foam like I am, I'm basically, stepping around all those little obstacles and allowing the fiberglass process just to be a straightforward, start to finish when we get there. The corners in particular, they're kind of hard to get to because you don't have anything like stability to really trim them. So you got to, again, be really meticulous and slow. This will be the last test fit for this particular piece. Again, I'm going to start by, placing the foam on that bottom spine. I'm going to tape it into place very securely. I'm actually going to tape this kind of as like a representation of how it would be glued in. You want to make sure that you have everything, exactly where you want it. This, because this foam is now beveled, it's actually going to sit against the body differently than it did before. So what I'm going to do is put my pinky in the door jamb here, and I'm going to, guide with my pinky and trace upwards. And from there, I'm establishing my new trim line to get rid of the excess, foam that I want taken off for this particular piece. The next step here is going to be, gluing this thing in. So what I'm going to be using is Weldwood Original Formula Contact Cement. I'm going to be doing 2 coats of this cement on the edges. For all intents and purposes here, this is probably the best product I've found to hold this foam in place. Once it's bonded, I mean, it's really bulletproof, but more importantly, it has no, interaction with the fiberglass resin, meaning that when you put the resin on, it's not going to degrade this to the point where the foam is actually just going to fall right through. So that is why I use this Weldwood contact cement. It's a really good product. If you're going to try and do this yourself, that is exactly what I would use. As far as a brush, I get these little acid brushes. You can get them from Harbor Freight, whatever. It's a couple dollars for like a pack of 50. Um, this process, though, again, like most things, it's very tedious. You want to make sure that you're coating these edges, very thoroughly. Again, just like with the resin, though, this foam is going to absorb a lot of this glue. So you kind of have to, walk around the edge multiple times and make sure that you're getting what you're looking for. For me, I like to build it up to a point where I see a nice glossy surface. For me, that means that there's enough of this adhesive that's on the surface of this foam as well as penetrating into the foam that it'll actually bond. Now, on the miter side, it's a little bit different because I'm only wanting to get this to stick to the fiberglass and bond. I'm not looking to bond it to metal, so I'm doing a much, much lighter coat. You don't want to go super heavy here. If this would saturate all the way through the foam and you would accidentally touch it, the foam will actually crush on itself and you'll have a massive divot where you just touched and you will not be able to get it apart. So again, if you would end up doing that, you would end up ruining the entire foam panel and that would be terrible. The next step is going to be adding the same, weldwood adhesive here to the round rod. Now, this is a little bit different because it doesn't have to absorb like the foam. So you're going to just put it on really generously and again, look for that kind of shiny finish to it as it's drying. I admittedly skirt the line on this one as far as the right way and the wrong way. If you read the directions, you're supposed to allow this stuff to basically fully cure and then push it together to bond it. I do not actually do that because it would be almost impossible to get these contours and these panels in. So while the foam is drying, I go over and apply, this contact cement to the round rod. Immediately from there, I'm grabbing my foam and I'm going to start putting this in. I want to leave myself the ability to kind of stretch the foam a little bit if I need to. I want to be able to work it into place, and if this stuff was fully dried, like it says on the can, I guarantee you it would be impossible to do this. So again, this stuff's going to be sitting for quite some time, and I guarantee you that it's perfectly fine. It's going to bond just well. Uh, and that's pretty much how we're going to be doing it. You're just going to, work the panel in with your fingers and smooth everything out. Again, you don't want to crush anything. It's just a real gentle, allow the panel to blend right where you want it. Here's a really good look at the finished product to this point. Outside in the light is really what I wanted to show everyone. Now, if you're looking at the panels and the spines, you can see that I've captured all the contours that I've wanted to, but the foam itself is sitting kind of flat, and that's really because I'm spanning such a long distance. Again, I've said before, I could have added more round rod, but that was, a lot more work. So at this point, what I'm going to be doing is adding, tape to the inside of this foam to get the contours where I want them. Now what I'm doing here is just kind of taking a little tool and just kind of pushing up on the underside of the foam. The foam itself is really locked in at this point, so you don't have to really be worried about, the foam coming loose from the round rod. But what I'm going to be doing is just applying tape to the backside of the foam here and really pushing it out to get the foam to not sag anymore or to really capture the contours that I put into the round rod. This is kind of a really important step because it's almost like in body working where you want to pop out a dent and you're trying to push from the backside and push the material forward. This will actually allow the foam to, retain the shape of the round rod so much better. And as you go panel by panel, you're going to see the contour really flow the whole way around. That's essentially what you're looking for. Now, once you have all your tape in place and you have all your panels, pretty much contoured, shaped how you want them, the next step is going to be add the fiberglass resin. And now I talked about this before, I'm trying to put this in just enough to soak about halfway through. Now, you kind of understand why now that I've put that tape on the back. If this were to soak all the way through, you would never be able to get that tape off. So, by only going halfway, we're going to solidify the front, which will actually lock everything in place, that you've done with the tape. On the other side of the car, you can see that the panels were a slightly different color. That was only because I was using a different catalyst on that side. It wasn't that this catalyst was wrong. It was just simply the end of a bottle that I had. This new catalyst that I'm using actually has a red dye to it. It's just for mixing properties to allow you to visually see when your catalyst and resin are actually mixed properly. The other nice thing about using a catalyst like that is that you can visually see as you're laying out how it's going down. If you look at the panels, you will see that, where I started is a nice rich red color and the panel above it is not as red. Well, that is simply because on the bottom section I was able to add more resin in that smaller area. And again, you can see I'm going over this one to make them basically look about the same shade. And as I'm doing that, I'm looking for light spots or really heavy spots to make sure that I'm trying to put this in as uniformly as possible so it solidifies, pretty evenly. This is kind of a tedious step too. You want to really hustle with that one because, your resin's going to cure. This entire back panel took about 12 ounces of resin just to wet out. So if you made it this far, then you kind of have a really good idea as to what it takes to make a moldless composite part. Um, Again, there's going to be a lot more to this that, with the fiberglass that has to go down to actually finish off the parts. But I hope this gives everyone a lot more insight as to, why I'm doing things and how I'm doing things. And again, if anyone has any more questions, please reach out and I will be happy to answer you. Thanks again for watching.